Hello and welcome everybody. It's Matt from MCG Gaming Bob. Today I've got a video for the Shorikai Genesis Engine deck that I've been running in the Jake and Joel Magic's tournament that they've got going on, their league that they run every month. This was like one of the pre-con months where you get to pick a pre-con commander. As long as it's within the commander that's also printed in the set, it could be used as the commander. I decided to go with Shorikai Genesis Engine because I wanted to do an artifact deck. I didn't want to do vehicles, but I wanted to do artifacts, and this is the one that I kind of landed on because it's got a really good draw engine. So I wanted to build it like focus around artifacts and typically swarming in and winning with either constructs, the 1/1 constructs that get pumped up, or based on just flooding the field with artifacts and then turning them all into 4/4 flyers that come in and win the game out of nowhere. So Shorikai, if you guys don't know what it is, it's a 4 mana 8/8 through 8 vehicle that can be your commander, and it has tap 1 colorless, tap him or it, draw 2 cards, then discard a card, create a 1/1 colorless pilot creature token with this creature's crew's vehicles as though its power were 2 greater. So in order to crew Shorikai with those pilots, you would have to have 3 of them. Very rarely did I ever crew Shorikai. I only really used him as a draw engine and as an artifact, but you could. I mean, because the pilots aren't artifacts themselves, they're just colorless, they don't really get benefits from all your artifact stuff. So him being an artifact, being an 8/8, it would be an 8/8 flyer. So I could see it being a thing, but I never really got there. Never really made it. It's just an option, you know? So yeah, let's get into it. So Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh, is the only planeswalker in the deck. Very strong, though. Only a couple dollars. About just a smidge. So $2.98. Fairly cheap. By the way, this is a $100 budget. Probably should mention that. It'll be in the title and whatnot, but $100 budget for this version. And then you get $50 per week to add on. And I'm going to have 4 different versions, each incrementing in a $50 budget edition for each week. And so you can kind of pick what deck you have the budget for. If you have a budget for $100, you can do that. $150, $200, and $250 for the final deck. And then maybe I should probably make like an actual non-budget version of each of these decks, but I always just kind of like, I kind of like building on a restraint. It kind of like forces you to kind of play cards you've never played before or wouldn't play because there's better versions, but in a budget, you kind of can only work with what you got. So anyways, Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh. It is a 4 mana planeswalker for loyalty. The first activated ability of an artifact you activate each turn costs 2 less to activate. Notably, Shorikai is not an activated ability. So it makes Shorikai free, which is a benefit each turn. If you have ways to untap Shorikai, you can do it for free on your turn, and do it for free on another opponent's turn, and do it for free on another opponent's turn. If you have ways to untap him and whatnot, that's pretty nice. Like Unwinding Clock, for instance. You'd be able to activate it each turn for free. Very nice. +1, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, unless you discard an artifact card. They're quite a lot of artifacts, so it's typically a draw 2, ditch 1. And this has somewhat of a discard theme, where there's a couple of reanimator spells as far as like reanimating your entire graveyard of artifacts or enchantments. But there's like 2 enchantments, so mainly artifacts. -2, target artifact becomes an artifact creature. If it isn't a vehicle, it has base power and toughness 4/4. Almost never going to use the -2, to be honest. Ideally, you want to go to the emblem, which is -6. You get an emblem with whenever an artifact you control becomes tapped, draw a card. I almost had it on week 1, and then I almost had it on week 2, and then I got it off on week 3, and it won the game for sure. Like so much value. Tapping your land or artifact lands for mana, and then drawing a card, and tapping your artifacts from whatever mana or abilities. Shorikai draws 3 cards and discards 1. Like there's just so many things. But yeah, so mainly that's the only planeswalker in there. Yeah, okay. Bronze Guardian, 5 mana, star 5, double strike, ward 2. Other artifacts you control have ward 2, and his power is equal to the number of artifacts you control. He can be pretty large on his own, and in the type of finisher that this is a deck that like typically is going to win like in 1 turn, not via combos, but actually via combat. In this league this month, you actually lose points by comboing off, so you don't really want to go like infinite combos or anything. So this is like the first deck in a long time that I've built that actually is designed to win by combat. It's typically in 1 swing. You can just, I mean, there's a couple different ways to do it. You can whittle your opponents down and whatnot. There's some strong artifacts, so this guy, he's gonna be hard to block. and then it also makes all of your other artifacts have a little bit of protection, and also protecting itself. That's only $1, so it's pretty strong. Containment Construct, this guy is awesome, one of the all-stars of the deck. It's almost tutorable. It is tutorable, but it's almost worth tutoring for, because with Shorikai, what it allows you to do is anything you discard, you're just able to play it this turn. So Containment Priest or Construct, 2 mana for a 2/1. Whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. If you do, you may play that card this turn. So the line of play that I used a lot was tap 1 mana, draw 2 cards, discard a land, and then you with Containment Priest, you just play your land for turn. Great, it's free. Very good value there. This is one of the actual finishers of the deck. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to flood the field with all the artifacts you can, and then when you see the time is right, you use Cyberdrive Awakener. It's a 6 mana 4/4 flyer that gives other artifact creatures you control have flying. Also, when it enters the battlefield, until end of turn, each non-creature artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/4. Pretty good finisher there. There's some stuff that synergizes with this that we'll see later on. This is also one of the all-stars of the deck. This card, 37 cents, it's actually insane. 3 mana for a 3/3, so decent power toughness for its cost, but has the ability, whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 2 colorless. If you do, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. You're playing an artifact deck. You're going to have 30, 40, 50 artifacts, not necessarily on the field, but the ability to play that many. On average, I would say this is like a 15 to a 20/20 on average. It's pretty good for 2 mana. Can't complain there. Emry, Lurker of the Loch, another really strong card. 3 mana for a 1/2, Merfolk Wizard. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control, so it basically has affinity, which is pretty cool on a Merfolk. Whenever Emry, Lurker of the Loch enters the battlefield, you mill 4 cards. And then you can tap Emry, choose target artifact card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. So, like I said before, you have ways to, anything you ditch from Shorikai, you have ways to recast them via this, or there's some spells later on that we'll get to. But very good recurrence with this card. If there's like a boardwalk, like I had a Vandal Blast played against me, I lost like 5 things. It wasn't too bad. My other opponent was playing Shorikai. He lost like more than that, it seemed. It was like 8 or 10. But with Emry, I was able to replay them from the graveyard without, I didn't really care too much. Pretty great. Etherium Sculptor, this just makes your artifacts cheaper. 2 mana for a 1/2, makes all your artifact spells cost 1 less to play. Very good. You want as many of those as you can. And there's another one, Foundry Inspector. 3 mana for a 3/2, artifact spells you cost 1 less to cast, which is nice. Gold Mirror, just 2 mana, 1/1 mana dork. Kappa Cannoneer, this is another one of those finishers where it doesn't seem like it would be kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's like a better card than or people are catching on to it or whatever, but in an artifact-centric deck, this is pretty nice. So it has Improvise, which allows your artifact spells to help cast it. It's 6 mana for a 4/4 otherwise. It also has Ward 4, which is a pretty high amount. Anything that targets it, you have to pay 4 extra mana in additional to whatever you paid for your spell. You can turn like a kill spell in like 6 or 7 mana spell. Not many people are going to want to do that. But the main thing that it has is whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on Kappa Cannoneer, and it can't be blocked this turn. But the bare minimum, every time you play an artifact, you're getting guaranteed damage, as long as they don't remove it, of course. But you're getting guaranteed damage as a 5/5, a 6/6, a 7/7. You're going to be playing a lot of artifacts. Yeah, really strong finisher. Just helps get in free damage. Lion Sash, just a really strong card. 2 mana, 1/1 creature. It has pay a white, exile a target card from a graveyard. If it was a permanent card, put a 1/1 counter on Lion Sash. It also has equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each counter on Lion Sash, and it has Reconfigure. This is mainly to deal with the graveyard problems. If there's any graveyard problems, you got a Lion Sash. It also just helps grow. It helps, you can put it on Kappa Cannoneer, he's still unblockable, or when he's unblockable, he gets real big. You can just exile things just to grow it if you have extra mana that you don't want to use it for. There's all kinds of great stuff, but yeah, great addition to have in the deck. Good card. Master Transmuter, this is a interesting card to have because there's some synergy with like Cyberdrive Awakener and whatnot. So it's a 4 mana 1/2. You can pay a blue, return an artifact you control to its owner's hand. You may put an artifact from your hand onto the battlefield. Most notably, you can basically just flicker a creature. Like for instance, for Cyberdrive Awakener, with Master Transmuter, you can bounce the Cyberdrive Awakener back to your hand and then just replay it. So the thing that you bounce can be the thing that you put back onto the battlefield. You can do a thing. There's other cards that also this combos with we'll get to, but basically any enter the battlefield effects will be re-triggered as long as it's an artifact. All kind of nice stuff to have. You can like save things that would be killed. All kinds of good stuff. Oswald Fiddlebender, 2 mana for a 2/2. He's got a thing called Magical Tinkering. For 1 white, tap it, sacrifice an artifact, search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. I hate that it's activate only as a sorcery. That really kills me. It really kills this card. I actually ended up taking it out after like week 2 or 3, I think. It's just, I actually never used it really. I think you have to kind of build around this card and like have specific artifacts at specific mana values. It's like a lot of things like, okay, so if I have a 1 mana artifact, like Skull Clamp, I don't really want to sacrifice the Skull Clamp to go get a 2 mana artifact unless it's like really friggin' good. And yeah, you can, there are 2 really good artifacts that at 2. It's just, it felt clunky, it felt weird. If you don't have like an Emry on the field, you're just like getting rid of that Skull Clamp, and the Skull Clamp would be more value than the 2 mana artifact you'd go to get in a lot of situations. It just felt weird. Again, I just never used it. I kept looking at it, I'm like, well, I don't want to sack anything. So yeah, I don't know. I end up taking it out. You could probably take it out, replace it with something better. Yeah. Padim, Console of Innovation, really strong card. 4 mana for a 1/4. Artifacts you control have hexproof. Very strong. And there's a really cool combo that we'll get to later on. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control the artifact with the highest converted mana cost or tied for the highest converted mana cost, draw a card. You're probably going to do that. You're probably going to draw. Rebbec, Architect of Ascension, another really, really strong card. 4 mana for a 3/4, so decent power toughness. Artifacts you control have protection from each converted mana cost among artifacts you control. So if you have a 1 mana artifact, all your artifacts are now protection from all 1 mana spells or creatures or whatever. Same thing with 0 and all the way up to however much you want, whatever the highest converted mana cost you have. Again, another combination of another combo that this has later on with a card that we'll get to. A very strong card, actually. Psy Master Thopterist. I actually ended up taking this out after like week 2, I think. It's a strong card to have in the beginning. It just gives you a bunch of 1/1 flyers whenever you cast an artifact spell. 3 mana for a 1/4. And then you can pay 2 mana, sacrifice 2 artifacts, draw a card. I like never did that. I think I got a few artifacts from casting artifact spells. It's fine. I think after the week 1, I wanted to kind of convert it more artifacts. I wanted just more artifacts. So you'll see some of these artifact cards in the later editions, they get taken away. Now, Scrap Trawler. This is a 3 mana 3/2. Whenever Scrap Trawler or another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return to your hand target artifact card in your graveyard with lesser mana value. Obviously, this with Oswald is really strong. Fiddlebender, of course. But it felt like it was just clunky, like again with Oswald. I like Scrap Trawler. It's a nice thing to have, like recursion. If something gets removed, you can get value from it, and then there's ways to get it back. So it's okay. Oswald's fine. It's just, like I said, it gets a little clunky. Shimmer Myr is really fun. 3 mana for a 2/2 that has flash, and then you can cast your artifact spells as though they had flash. Just really nice to be able to react to all kinds of stuff, and it creates some really interesting things that you can do, especially when your artifacts cost cheaper. Silver Myr, this is a 2 mana 1/1 that just adds blue, just mana dork. Spellskite, really strong card. 2 mana for an 0/4, so decent size butt, and you can pay Phyrexian blue or blue mana. I should say 2 life or a blue mana. Change a target of target spell or ability to Spellskite. This thing is really nice because it gives you kind of like protection in a lot of different situations. You can kind of like mess up a lot of different things. If somebody tries to like enchant something of theirs that says target, you can actually choose the target to Spellskite in a lot of situations. Equipping something because it's an ability. If somebody tries to equip an artifact or like an equipment to one of their creatures, you can actually use Spellskite to change it so it goes to Spellskite. Like, Spellskite is absolutely nutty. He makes things all kinds of weirdness. Obviously, they're going to try to remove it right away, which is fine. If anything, it eats a removal spell for 2 colorless. I'm okay with this. And of course, because it's an artifact, we have ways to get it back with Scrap Trawler and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, really fine. Sun Titan, this, I kind of just wanted to put a Sun Titan in, to be honest. It's 36 cents, so like it's just super cheap. But I ended up removing it after the first week. It's just 6 mana, it's just a lot. When your artifacts are like cheaper from like all the different like discount stuff, it feels bad to pay 6 mana for a Sun Titan. But it's not bad. I mean, it gets your stuff back, gets your Spellskites back, and there's a lot of converted mana cost less than 3 or 3 or less. So yeah, it's just a strong card, but I ended up removing it for like I think a Phyrexian Metamorph. Reality Chip, this card is fantastic. 2 mana for an 0/4 Equipment Jellyfish. It is a creature. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, so you get some information, which is nice. And then, as long as Reality Chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Ideally, you want to reconfigure this as soon as you can, so you get that more value, being able to play lands and cast spells from the top. And it also allows you to do some really interesting things. If you have any kind of cost reduction and Sensitive Divining top with the Reality Chip configured, you can actually draw your entire deck for free, which is pretty cool. But obviously not with a $100 budget. It requires a bit more budget. Thought Monitor is just a easy draw engine because it's 7 mana for a 2/2. Really bad, of course. But it has affinity for artifacts, so ideally, or typically in most situations, it's going to be 1 mana or 2 mana for a 2/2 flyer. And then when it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. And again, with like Master Transmuter, you're able to flicker this, draw 2 cards, flicker this, draw 2 cards. So pretty good draw engine there for just a singular blue. Tribute Mage, one of the tutor mages. There's a few Tribute. There's Tribute, Treasure, a few other ones. I think they're in this deck mostly. They just allow you to, when they enter the battlefield, go tutor for something. I think I ended up taking out some of these because they were a little clunky. They're not artifacts, so they cost more mana most of the time. But they do allow you to go tutor for the artifacts that are like really combo-y or strong, like Isochron Scepter. So as the budget gets higher, they become more valuable. So in the $100 deck, it's not too valuable, but later on it does get more valuable. At least specific ones, like this one here. 2 is a good number for Isochron Scepter, of course. Trinket Mage, this is for 1 or less, which is nice. Tribute Mage is 2 only, but Trinket Mage is 1 or less, excuse me. So you're able to get like even artifact lands if you really need to. Or you go get like Soul Ring or all kinds of, 1 mana artifacts. There's a ton. Voltaic Key, Manifold Key. There's all kinds of good stuff. Good targets. Trophy Mage. This one I know for sure I took out after week 2. There isn't a ton that are at converted mana cost 3 exactly. There are a couple, but like they're not like, I don't know. I remember like looking through the deck and going like, I'd rather not waste the 3 mana to cast this. Go get a 3 mana artifact. It just, it gets a little clunky, so that one you can definitely remove if you'd like. Vedalken Archmage. 4 mana for an 0/2, so the power toughness is kind of weak, but whenever you cast an artifact, draw a card. Artifact spell. Pretty strong draw engine there. Going to be casting a lot of artifacts. Wonder. Very strange card to have in here. You would think from just kind of looking at it. Not an artifact. The 2/2 for 4. It's kind of bad for flyer. But as long as Wonder is in your graveyard and you control an island, creatures you control have flying. While with Shorikai, you're almost guaranteed going to get this into your graveyard. As long as they don't remove your graveyard, you'll have all your creatures will just always have flying. So a very strong effect to have in the graveyard. Brilliant Restoration. This is one of the reanimations of all your artifacts that you'll get. The mana cost is pretty crazy at 4 white. It actually probably should have like adjusted the mana curve slightly more towards white, or maybe included more dual lands of like the cheaper variety, just to be able to cast this, because sometimes 4 white is pretty rough. But for 7 mana, you're able to return all artifacts and enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if like you get Vandal Blasted, this is a good way to recover from that. Also, if you're draw ditching from Shorikai or Tezzeret, it refills your graveyard full of these artifacts, and then you can Brilliant Restoration them all to the battlefield for a lot of value. Dance of the Manse is another similar but different. So instead of all of them, you can kind of pick and choose which ones. So it's a blue and a white and X. Return up to X target artifact and or non-aura enchantment cards, each with mana value X or less, from your graveyard to the battlefield. If X is 6 or more, those permanents are 4/4 creatures in addition to the other types. You can kind of like animate all of your artifacts from the graveyard to the field, and then they become 4/4s, but they're also still the artifacts. You kind of get a little bit of value there. And then, of course, with like Cyberdrive Awakener, they're going to stay 4/4s already, but they'll have flying, and then you can kind of swing in and whatnot. Kind of combo-y finish type deal. But yeah, this just allows you to reanimate a bunch of your stuff. Sometimes you'll want to do the 4 or the 6 or more, so they're 4/4s, and sometimes you don't want them to be creatures at all. So yeah, it just depends. But this gives you the flexibility to do so, and it can, reanimate very specific cards. So it's pretty good. Preordained is just a draw card. There's like 1 in here because, honestly, you probably don't even need it, but I figure with Shorikai, you have so much draw, it's kind of like whatever. But a tutor that's very cheap. This card's great. 3 mana. Search your library for an instant or sorcery card, put it in your hand. Great. The tutor. Gotta love it. Supreme Verdict, there's 2 board wipes in here. Supreme Verdict is one of them. This spell can't be countered, which is nice. It actually is very relevant because there are counter spells, you know, in the world. So having the ability to just guarantee wipe the board, kind of slow people down. Your artifacts, like Shorikai, he's a vehicle, so he's not, as long as you don't crew him and then wipe the board, you're fine. You keep your draw engine on the field, you wipe the board, you kind of rebuild your own stuff, and even if you are destroying your stuff, you've got the way to reanimate it, so it's not too bad. Vanquish the Hordes, the other destruction spell. This is 8 normally, which is pretty bad, of course. But this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. Destroy all creatures. It typically gets pretty cheap. It's almost always 2, so that's just nice. Gotta have removal. Access Denied. This is a counter spell that is pretty expensive, but because it gives you 1/1 flyer artifacts, it makes it kind of worth it. It feels a little bad to keep a 5 mana, but this deck has a decent bit of ramp that it's not too bad. And Offer You Can't Refuse is just, in my opinion, one of the best counter spells they've ever printed. Very, very strong card. It's just a singular blue, counter target non-creature spell. They get 2 treasures, but a lot of times you don't care. You really don't care, honestly. It's just a great counter spell. Fantastic. Arcane Denial, another great counter spell, just counter target spell, and they get to draw 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and you draw 1. Again, a lot of times when you're like, I don't play a lot of counter Magic where you're like, I counter things that are like going to end the game or going to be like so good that like you have to counter. Like I don't really like having like 15 counter spells in the deck and you're like you're countering like whatever's good. I counter things that are like game ending. There was a really good counter spell war between me and another patron of Jake and Joel called, his name is Keto. Good guy, but we had this like counterspell war and like this crazy interactions and like it was just, I don't know, it was like one of the best situations where like it felt good to have counterspells and counterspells and counterspells and kill spells and like reactions. Like I don't know, it was just a really good exchange of interactions. And even in a budget deck, we both have budget decks, but it was still fun. I don't know, it was good. You gotta have cheap counterspells like this to be able to do that. Speaking of counterspell, basic counterspell, just counter target spell for 2 blue. Dispatch, one of the removals, it's really great in this deck because they get nothing. You know, like Swords of the Plowshare and Path to Exile, they're more expensive as far as cost for the budget, and they're also, they get some upside to the removal. This, as long as you have Metalcraft, it just removes it, exiles it from the game. Otherwise, it'll tap the creature. So you don't want to do this if you have, like, 3 artifacts, unless you really have to, but if you have, like, 3 artifacts and, like, somebody can, like, remove one and, like, then it just taps it, that sucks. So ideally you have, you'll have plenty. It's very rare that you won't have enough. Dovin's Veto, this counter spell is great because it can't be countered. So it's a counter spell that can't be countered. Very good. The white and the blue. $4 of the budget, so it's got to be really good. Faithful Mending, another really good big draw ditch card. So it's a white and a blue instant. You gain 2 life, you draw 2 cards, you discard 2 cards, and then it has flashback. This is great for, again, if you want to like fill your graveyard and then animate everything. If you've got like a Dance with the Manse in the graveyard or in your hand, you can just kind of, you know, fill the graveyard. Also, it's draw power, gain life gain. Yeah, fantastic. Also, because it has flashback, you can like that could be the card that you ditch with Shorikai. If you've got like a bunch of good cards, you still get value from discarding it. Just a great card. Price is only 37 cents to be honest. Negate, just another great counterspell. Path to Exile, good removal, but they do get a basic land. It is instant though, so it's nice. Rapid Hybridization, another really, really good card. Just a singular blue, destroy target creature. Can't be regenerated. They get a 3/3 frog. You don't care. You're going to kill something that's like really good, and the 3/3 frog's not going to be as good, trust me. Swords to Plowshare, another great removal. They gain life equal to its power, but again, you're going to be removing a good thing. Who cares? The life gain's not that big a deal. So Whir of Invention, very, very strong instant spell that has Improvise and 3 blue and X. Improvise, your artifact spells can help cast the spell. Each artifact you tap activates it or pays for essentially 1 of the colorless. And then at instant speed, you can search your library for an artifact card with mana value X or less, put it on the battlefield, shuffle. This allows you to get like either combo piece. There's not really many combos, but there are like pseudo combos like Iskron Scepter with a dramatic reversal. It's not typically infinite, like the way that you'll win. Like you might have infinite mana, but you might not be able to like utilize all of that mana to like just win on the spot. But you'll get a ton of value from it. You can kind of Whir of Invention, you know, at the end of somebody's turn and then get that combo online kind of out of nowhere. Or you can just do any other good artifact. Cyberdrive Awakener, you can kind of like, if you need your creatures to all have flying, boom. You got a bunch of blockers now. You got a bunch of flying blockers. Like, there's just all kinds of stuff that Whir of Invention can do. Great. Arcane Signet, just a mana rock. Sorry, Signet, mana rock. Crystal Shard. This is another one of those things where you're taking advantage of your the cheap mana, the cheap costing of like for Thought Monitor. You can tap a blue, bounce a Thought Monitor, and then for a single blue, replay it and draw 2 cards. So it's like not as good as Master Transmuter, but this allows you to bounce your own creatures to replay them to get value from them. For instance, like Cyberdrive Awakener, if you play your Cyberdrive Awakener and you actually attack somebody, you kill one person. Next turn, you can do the same thing. You can bounce your Cyberdrive Awakener back to your hand with 1 blue, and then you just choose not to pay the 1 colorless. And then you can replay it to then reanimate everything back up and then swing again. Also, very rarely, your opponent will tap out and they'll forget you have a Crystal Shard, and you can bounce one of their creatures for free. That's pretty nice as well. All right, Imposter Mech. Pretty good vehicle. So it's a 2-mana 3/1. You may have Imposter Mech enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature an opponent controls. Except, it's a vehicle artifact with crew 3 and it loses all other card types. So you could have Imposter Mech come into play as like one of their commanders and then just get the benefits of their commander that it's not a creature, but if it has like a static ability or an activated ability, you get that. And now it's a vehicle, so it's not even a creature at the time. As long as you don't crew it, it kind of like skates around board wipes and it skates around targeted creature removal. And then I don't know. I think the Imposter Mech, it's tutorable. This card seems, I feel like for 78 cents, it seems insane to me how cheap it is. I feel like it's got a lot of versatility. Liquimetal Torque. This card is way better than I thought it was. For a long time, people were using this card. And I'm just kind of like, I mean, yeah, it's a mana rock for 2. Okay, yeah, that's fine. But the real big benefit of it is target non-land permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. What this allows you to do with Rebbec and the blue man that gives all your artifacts hexproof. What it allows you to do is it allows you to tap this and then target your creatures that aren't normally artifacts, and they now have protection from, Rebbec has protection from all the different converted mana costs of stuff because it's now an artifact. It also counts as a 4-mana artifact, so it gives protection from 4 cast spells, or 4 cost spells, mana value spells. And then, of course, the penman guy, I forgot what his name is, the one that gives all your artifacts hexproof, it'll now give itself hexproof if you make an artifact with Liquimetal Torque. So a lot of good value there. Say somebody casts Vandal Blast and you want to like take something else out with it. You can like target one of your opponent's things, making an artifact so that it also dies. So yeah, all kinds of cool stuff. Liquimetal Torque, super strong spell in an artifact deck, very valuable. Manifold Key, very, very strong card in this deck with Shorikai. So it's a 1-mana artifact, and you can pay 1 mana, untap another target artifact. So you can untap your Shorikai and draw some more cards, make some more pilots. I always forget, by the way, it makes a pilot. I can't tell you how many times I've tapped Shorikai just to draw the 2 cards in ditch, because I think that's good enough, let alone it makes a body as well. Like, okay, sure, yeah, I forgot. Oh yeah, it makes a pilot. I mean, they're good blockers, they're chump blockers. You can crew, I guess. Like I said, I did it very rarely. But it also has 3 colorless mana. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. So, kind of a double value there. You've also got Mech Titan Core, which I did eventually remove after the first week because it requires you to remove 4 other artifact creatures and or vehicles you control. And because I didn't really go the vehicle route, you don't really ever want to remove 4 other artifact creatures that you control. I love the idea of having Mech Titan Core. Like I played it in a draft and it was like actually super fun. But I think it's a little cute in this deck. I don't think it's worth it. I think it's worth removing. Replace with something better. Mirage Mirror is a really fun card. So for 3 mana, it's an artifact that just sits on the field. You can pay 2 colorless. Mirage Mirror becomes a copy of target artifact, creature, enchantment, or land until end of turn. This opens all kinds of possibilities. Just like you can like pay 2 mana to copy a Thrawn Dynamo to get an extra mana. Like you can copy an Arcane Signet if you really need like to filter colorless mana into a color. You can target creatures to get like their activated abilities. I've even had Mirage Mirror copy Shorikai for the turn, just to get extra draws. Yeah, you have to sacrifice your Shorikai, but like in dire situations, you got to do what you got to do. So sometimes you do it because it gets any activated abilities that it can become a copy of. It gets everything. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff it can do. Mirage Mirror is fantastic, very versatile. Sculpting Steel is another one of those things where I've cast a Sculpting Steel as a Shorikai to then sack my real Shorikai. You throw it in the graveyard, so you can then reanimate it if you've got a reanimator card. but then you can reactivate the actual card again, and it becomes Shorikai forever, you know. Yeah, and it just has a lot of versatility. Another one of those things where you can, like, master Transmuter, you can bounce this, and then have it come into play as something else, you know, all kinds of fun stuff. Again, versatility. I like versatility. Skull Clamp is really, really strong. It's $5 of the budget, so it's a lot of the budget, but it's very strong. Because Shorikai is creating these 1/1 pilots, you just have fuel for Skull Clamp. You tap one, draw 2 cards, discard a card, make a pilot, equip the pilot for another 1. So for 2 mana, you're drawing 4 cards and discarding 1. Pretty strong. I like it. Good value. Soul Ring. It's good. Mana Rock. Swiftfoot Boots gives you protection. Equip creature has hexproof and haste for 2, and then equips for 1. Ideally, you would use the Lightning Greaves, but again, because this is more of a budget side, you want to keep the budget down. I think Lightning Greaves is like $6 or so. Thought Vessel, this just gives you no maximum hand size, and it's a Mana Rock. Grand Dynamo, another good Mana Rock, 4 mana, it taps for 3, so if it's cheap, if it's cheaper rather, it allows you to get either the same mana, just it lets you ramp a lot. 3 colorless is pretty good. Voltaic Key is the same thing as Manifold Key, just allows you to untap target artifact for 1 colorless. Again, you're mainly going to use it for Shorikai, but there are other artifacts. You can even use it for Grand Dynamo to gain more mana, you know, ramping. Artificer Class, super strong enchantment. So for 2 blue and a white, the first artifact spell you cast each turn costs 1 to cast, 1 less to cast. And then you can level it up for level 2. It's the same mana cost, 1 blue and 1 colorless. When this class becomes level 2, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an artifact card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So if you're like, you know, go get an artifact, it is random, but it's basically like draw or pay 2, draw artifact. Kind of nice. And then for 6 mana, blue and 5, at the beginning of your end step, create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control. Most of the time, this is just like a pseudo ramp / draw. Like, very rarely did I ever pay the 6 mana to level it up to level 3. But if you've got nothing else better to do, sure, go for it. It's pretty good. Copy artifacts. Like I said, with Shorikai, I mean, in theory, you could target Shorikai, make a copy of him. You sacrifice the real one in order to then activate his ability again if you've already done it on your turn. You can do that every turn, technically, because you can make a copy of an artifact that is a copy of Shorikai. So you can just kind of cycle them weirdly and draw 4 a turn, discard 2. I don't know, make pilots, all kinds of weird stuff. Darksteel Mutation, just a simple removal. This thing is pretty brutal on a commander because it makes it indestructible and it loses all abilities and card types and creature types, and it's just an 0/1. So if a deck that like really depends on their commander, like Galazeth for instance, or Kinnan, or basically any colors that have like a very kind of a hard time dealing with like an enchantment, it gets real brutal. Shorikai doesn't care because it's not a creature, so he doesn't care about that. I mean, if it is a creature, then it's gonna be hard for them to enchant unless it's flash. But yeah, just being able to remove somebody's commander is pretty brutal. Then we're into the lands now. You want to play the artifact lands, of course, because they count as artifacts for your constructs. They count as artifacts for your affinities. They count as artifacts for when you attack. When you're Cyberdrive Awakener, you definitely want to play all the artifact lands you can. Ancient Den's one of them. Buried Ruin just allows you to get your artifacts back from the grave, one of them at least. And Command Tower's a good land. Darksteel Citadel, it's indestructible notably, which is nice, and it is a artifact land. You've got Islands, Plains, Port Town, just nice dual land for cheap. Prairie Stream, same thing, nice dual land for cheap. And then Razor Tide Bridge, another dual land, is an artifact land, also indestructible, which is really nice for when you animate those creatures and whatnot. And then Rogue's Passage is just a nice, like, unblockable thing to have. Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe even having just a Plains is better in this situation. But I figured it's sometimes nice to have unblockable, especially since your commander is an 8/8. You could screw him up and then throw him in. And then Seed of Synod is the last artifact land. And that's it. So the deck, in the first week, I didn't do too great as far as that's a deck tech as far as that's concerned. But now I'll kind of give you like the week by week update because we're on week 4 now of this month. I didn't bother making an update video because the first week I put the deck together. Normally I playtest it with my Thursday group in like a bunch of different Commander games, and I try to see how it goes. I get an idea of how it plays and whatnot. And the very first week, I didn't even know that you could activate his ability right away. I assumed that he was still a creature and he would have summoning sickness for some reason. I've never really played with vehicles, to be honest. So the very first week I like played him and it just passed, and then like I didn't activate him at all. And of course nobody said anything. But yeah, so that was annoying. So the first week it didn't do too great. I didn't really know how the deck worked. I didn't get a chance to like even playtest it at all. I was very like behind. I just kind of like made the concept of the deck and like threw it together. So I didn't really have a chance to like, you know, innovate or change anything or whatever. So I didn't do great. Second week did better. Had a better concept. Was able to play in a Thursday group for my friends with my in-person friends, and we were able to play. And play test it, and I got a better idea of how the deck runs, and like saw little combos with it, like the Liquimetal Torque combos and all that kind of fun stuff. The second week budget version is going to be better than the first. The second week I still didn't win, but it did way better. It felt better to play. It felt more smooth. A lot of times for me, like this deck, it felt kind of dirtily. Like you're playing a bunch of artifacts, you're drawing a bunch of cards, but you're not like winning. You're doing like no damage. Very rarely you're ever attacking. Like it's like I said, like you're playing Cyberdrive Awaken and then you're like swinging, and that's like your big move. That's your big swing. Most of the time that's enough to win the game, so that's fine. It's just kind of like a one-trick pony almost. Like there's not really many other things you can do, at least in the way I built it. So it felt strange. So like the first and second week didn't do great. The second week, like I said, somebody comboed off, and a good buddy of mine, Nate, actually comboed off, and he did well. He was playing another artifact deck, but he was playing like a red-black artifact deck, I believe, and had like a really good synergy going, and popped off and won. Third week was last week, and I did really well, actually. The deck was, as the budget got a little higher, and I got like a better idea of how the deck's supposed to run and like how to play, I was able to kind of start building a board, and like you kind of like assemble your pieces together, and then you go, like I said, you go for the big finish. So by week 3, the deck budget, the budget version of week 3 works a lot better. I feel like it's more smooth, and it has like the better flexibility and the ability to like last long enough to get to your big finish. So it's not fast by any means. It's not fast. You're not gonna like combo off and win. This deck is not designed to combo off and do anything fast. It's not quick. Don't play it in your groups that are super powerful. This is just a fun artifact deck that is good value. It's definitely not going to be a deck that you just take to your CDH table and pop off and win. There's no combos or anything like that. It's just a fair, fine deck. I would say it's like a power level like 5, 6 maybe. It's got a good draw engine, but like I said, it doesn't really do much of anything for the first like 6, 7 turns probably. Like you're just building your board. There are some degenerate things you can do, but it takes a lot to do that. So a lot of moving pieces and a lot of fun to assemble. You're kind of like building your big mech titan, kind of like your big attack or whatever. I'm sure there's plenty of other ways to build this deck, but this is the way I decided to. So week 4 will be this upcoming week, and at this point I'm like I'm like rank 8 or 9 out of like 15 or 16. So I could probably finish in the top 5 or so. But yeah, so I'll be able to add in a few more combo pieces. Like I said, the different budgets are going to be down in the description. There should be $100, $150, $200, and I haven't done the $200 version yet. And I'll probably make a really quick update video for the 4th week and the final form of the deck at the $250 marker. And then kind of give you my final thoughts, and maybe I'll try to figure out if there's a way to like build it way quicker with like no budget at all. And obviously you're going to want to use things like mana crypt and mana vault, and if you use the crazy artifacts and all the moxes, or not the moxes, but well, you can use mox like amber, and those kind of things will help speed up the deck and become way easier to pop off and win. So maybe I'll go that route, and I'll see for the next video and kind of give you guys an update like that. But yeah, this video is already long enough, so thanks for watching, everybody. If you watched everything, let me know. If you liked the video, thumbs up and thumbs down, and let me know why. Comment below and let me know if you guys build it. Thanks for watching.